The cabin sat where the river bent sharply toward the mountains, its roof sagging under decades of snow, its chimney tilting like it had been caught mid-sigh. Locals spoke of it in half-joking tones, a place left behind after some family just up and left, leaving furniture, clothes, even pictures on the wall. But what kept the legend alive wasn't the abandonment. It was the bear. Hikers swore they'd seen it at sunset, padding out of the pines with deliberate steps. It wasn't foraging. It wasn't scavenging. It would simply visit. Circle the front porch. Sit in front of the door like a sentry. Then vanish back into the tree-line when the moon came up. Jake had heard the stories for years. As a forest ranger, he dismissed most campfire gossip as people reading too much into a normal animal's habits. But there was something about the way people described this bear that made him pause. The strange stillness in its movements, the almost human patience in the way it waited. And then there was his own memory. He had been here once, as a boy, with his father. They'd been caught in a sudden downpour while fishing and had taken shelter in that same cabin. Jake remembered the smell of cedar, the faded curtains, and a rocking chair that swayed with each gust of wind. He remembered, too, a faint scratching sound in the night, rhythmic, almost like someone was carving something into the floor. When another hiker reported the bear just last week, Jake decided he'd see it for himself. Not from the comfort of a ranger's truck. Not through binoculars. He wanted to be there, close enough to see its eyes, to know if the stories were just folklore, or something else entirely. So one autumn evening, with the air smelling faintly of frost, he took the trail toward the river bend and the cabin that waited like an unopened letter. The trail narrowed as Jake neared the bend in the river. The sound of rushing water grew louder, mixing with a dry whisper of pine needles under his boots. The cabin emerged slowly from the shadows, not as a ruin, but as something paused in time. The porch board sagged, the windows were clouded, yet the place still seemed occupied. Jake stopped 20 yards out. Something moved in the tree-line to his left, a slow, deliberate shifting of weight. He felt it before he saw it, the quiet heaviness of a presence that belonged here more than he did. The bear stepped out. Its coat was dark as wet earth, its left shoulder marked by a pale streak of fur, like an old scar. It didn't charge. Didn't growl. It simply walked into the clearing with the slow certainty of something that had made this journey many times before. Its eyes, deep amber in the fading light, locked onto Jake. He stayed perfectly still. Years of ranger training told him to keep his distance, to back away slowly if needed. But the bear didn't come closer, not yet. Instead, it padded toward the porch, each step measured, as though performing a ritual. It reached the front door, lowered its massive head, and sniffed the wood. Then it sat. Not a lazy sprawl, not the restless shifting of a wild animal, but upright, attentive. Waiting. Jake's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He wanted to lift his camera, but the moment felt too fragile, like glass that would shatter if he moved. The bear glanced at him once more, and in that brief flicker of connection, Jake felt something strange. Not fear. Not even curiosity. But the eerie sensation that the bear was not guarding the cabin from him. It was guarding the cabin for someone. And whoever that someone was, the bear believed they might still return. Dusk slid into the valley like ink poured over the trees. Jake had no intention of staying this close to the bear after dark, but something in the animal's stillness kept him rooted. It didn't wander off or forage. It simply remained by the porch, eyes fixed on the tree-line as though expecting something to emerge at any moment. He made camp 20 paces away, keeping the cabin and the bear in sight. The air grew colder, the smell of damp pine settling into his clothes. The fire he built was small, not enough to threaten, just enough to keep the shadows from swallowing him whole. Every so often, the bear's head would lift. Ears twitching. Nose testing the wind. Each time, Jake would find himself holding his breath, scanning the darkness for movement. Nothing came, yet the sense of watchfulness never eased. Hours passed. The forest was unervingly quiet. No owls, no rustle of nocturnal animals. Just the constant murmur of the river beyond the cabin and the low rumble of the bear's breathing. Jake scribbled in his field notebook, noting the unusual behavior. Bears didn't stand guard. They didn't sit like sentinels through the night. This was intentional, purposeful. And though he didn't want to admit it aloud, it felt protective. Midnight came, and with it, a sound. Faint. A single twig snapping in the woods beyond. The bear rose instantly, massive shoulders rolling as it stepped to the edge of the porch. It didn't growl, but the sheer weight of its presence made the darkness hesitate. The sound faded. The forest settled again. The bear returned to its place. Jake lay awake until dawn's first pale light began filtering through the trees. The bear hadn't slept. Not once. It was still there. Watching. Waiting. For what, or for who, Jake could only guess. The morning mist clung to the cabin like it was hiding something. Jake stretched, rubbing the cold from his hands, and saw the bear still in its post. Only now, it wasn't looking into the woods, it was looking at him. It rose slowly, massive paws thudding softly against the damp earth, and stepped down from the porch. Jake's instinct told him to back away, but the bear didn't come toward him. Instead, it lumbered to the cabin wall, nose pressed against the old timber, sniffing with deep, deliberate breaths. Then, with surprising precision, it tapped the base of the wall with its claws, 3 quick strikes, as if knocking. The sound was hollow. Jake frowned. The cabin had belonged to an old trapper decades ago, long abandoned and rotting. Jake had never gone inside, wary of the sagging beams. But the bear's behavior tugged at his curiosity. He approached carefully, feeling the bear's gaze on him. Kneeling, he brushed away a mat of moss and dead pine needles from where the bear had tapped. Beneath the weathered boards, a faint line appeared, a seam in the wall that didn't belong. Jake pressed along the edge. The wood shifted slightly. Hidden hinges groaned. A panel swung inward, releasing a stale, earthy smell. Inside was darkness, and something else. A small, crude wooden box sat just beyond reach, half buried in dust. Jake slid it toward him, heart hammering. The lid wasn't locked. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a bundle of photographs, a child's worn leather shoe, and a folded note so brittle it threatened to disintegrate in his hands. The handwriting was faded but legible. "If you find this, tell him I waited." Jake looked up. The bear was watching him intently, as though it understood exactly what he'd just uncovered. The forest around them felt heavier, the air colder. And for the first time, Jake had the chilling sense that he was part of something far older than this cabin, or the bear or himself. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Jake crouched in the damp earth, staring at the note in his trembling hands. The bear hadn't moved, only shifted slightly, angling its head as though urging him on. "What do you want me to do?" Jake whispered. His voice sounded too loud in the stillness. He turned the note over, half expecting it to crumble. On the back, faint pencil marks traced the outline of a slope and a creek, with an X scratched near a crooked tree. A map. Jake glanced toward the bear. Its massive shoulders rolled once before it turned and began lumbering toward the tree-line, glancing back after every few steps. The message was clear. They moved together, Jake keeping a careful distance, boots sinking into the moss. The forest floor grew uneven, the sound of rushing water swelling in the distance. The air smelled sharper here, colder, as if the river carried secrets down from the mountains. After nearly an hour, the bear stopped before a towering pine. Its trunk bent slightly at the base, just like the one marked on the map. Beneath it, half buried under roots, was a rusted tin box. Jake dug it out with numb fingers. Inside was a locket, its hinge rusted but still holding. He pried it open, revealing 2 faded faces, a woman with soft eyes and a boy no older than 10. On the inside lid, scratched in uneven letters, were the words, "My son will know." Jake's stomach tightened. The boy in the picture bore the same sharp jawline and dark hair he saw in his own mirror. The bear let out a low, almost mournful sound, then turned toward the deeper woods, as though its part in this story was over. Jake stood frozen, the locket heavy in his palm, knowing that whatever this meant, the final piece of the story still lay ahead. Snow had begun to fall, soft and slow, muffling the world until even his own footsteps felt distant. Jake stood by the crooked pine, the locket pressed against his chest beneath his jacket, his breath forming ghostly clouds in the air. The bear was gone. It had slipped into the woods without sound, leaving only a single set of tracks that the wind was already erasing. He followed them anyway. Each step took him deeper into the forest's frozen heart, past streams sealed under glassy ice and boulders wearing white crowns. It was quiet, not the emptiness of a place abandoned, but the reverent hush of a place guarding something sacred. After what felt like hours, he saw it, a small clearing surrounded by snow-laden pines. In the center stood a crude wooden marker, weathered and leaning, a name carved faintly into its surface. He knelt to brush away the snow, fingers trembling. The name was his mother's. Beneath it, a single phrase was etched, "Not alone." Jake's throat tightened. He understood now. The locket, the map, the bear, all of it had led him here. Whoever had buried her had wanted him to know she had been found. That in her final winter, she had not faced it in solitude. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest sound, a deep, rhythmic breath. He looked up. At the edge of the clearing, the bear stood watching, its massive shape haloed in falling snow. There was no fear in its eyes, only an unspoken understanding. Jake nodded once, not as a man to an animal, but as one keeper of memory to another. The bear turned and faded into the whiteness, each step swallowed by the winter until it was gone. The forest closed in around him, but it didn't feel empty. The witness had passed the story on, and now it was his to carry.